Hi, everyone. My name is Carrie Wise. I'm a VP at TrueCar, and I'm joined with my team member, Matt Jones, who's a director at TrueCar. And I want to thank you for joining us for Industry Insider. Before we jump into the show today, we want to make sure that you share this with your friends. So please press the share button. We want to make sure that the word gets out about Industry Insider and all the great insights we learn from the guests that we have on this show. Matt, why don't you give them a little background on what Industry Insider is all about while I share it?
All right, fantastic. Industry Insider is one of the things that we are most happy about here at TrueCar. Carrie's been in the business for over 20 years. I've been in auto for nearly 20 years. And we both love auto. We live auto just like everybody else who works at TrueCar. But we know we've realized that these past couple months have been just really challenging. They've been unprecedented. And we wanted to create a platform, an opportunity for dealers to learn best practices and tips and techniques from some of the industry's best, brightest movers and shakers. And this particular episode, we're very excited because it seems like all the conversation is about used cars. And we are going to have a used car conversation. So if you are at a new franchise store or if an independent store, you probably gonna hang out for this particular episode. This is gonna have some really good stuff because we have a fantastic, particularly fantastic guest today.
Well, and it's interesting with used cars, and Matt, on our site, we've seen a real increase in used car traffic over the last couple months with COVID. So I definitely want to talk to our guest today. David Simches is so excited because he is an expert in this area, not only in terms of what we've seen in terms of traffic, but also the challenges we're facing right now in terms of inventory. Once again, we want you to share this with your friends, your family, your colleagues in the automotive industry. I do want to mention that the show is brought to you by TrueCar. And if you're interested in anything related to the TrueCar program or you're a dealer that has questions, you can always go to truecar.com/dealer. And learn more. We also have a blog that you can go to on that same site that has lots of articles and insights, including a spotlight on David Simches you'll see on our dealer blog. So we're going to jump in, Matt. I'll let you introduce our guests.
Yes, David Simches is the used car director for the Crown Group. If you're in the Florida area, if you're on the East Coast, you're probably familiar with Crown Cars. But for everybody else who's not familiar with the group, they're big. They do business. They sell more than 25 new brands, and they're located in multi-states. And we have the used car director for that group. And this guy is a guru. It doesn't get much better when it comes to managing large numbers of vehicles and understanding how the used car market is flowing and ebbing. So you know what? Let's just bring him on. Hey, David.
David.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you,
everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for joining us. And
thank you for making the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're such an important guest because we really haven't touched on used cars on this show. We've talked a lot about marketing. We've talked about more on the new car side, but we definitely want to dig into the used car side and the opportunities and challenges that dealers are facing right now. So before we jump in, though, I want to know a little bit about you. How long have you been in the business, and how did you get into auto retail?
I started selling cars in May of 1986, so it's 34 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it just kind of happened, really, just stumbled upon it. So I had gone to culinary school after high school and just started selling cars to give it a shot. And it's 34 years later. What can I tell you?
Wow. So you're obviously good at your craft in terms of the car business, but you can cook as well, I guess. Based on the scope.
Yeah. I try to.
And that's such a good story because a lot of the people that we talk to, myself included, I didn't plan on being in auto for 20 years. You know what I mean? It's just like give it a shot, you fall in love, and then here you are 34 years later. So that's just fantastic. A little bit more about can you tell us a little bit about where does Crown Cars operate for people who aren't as familiar with the group?
Sure. We have two hubs in Florida. We're in the St. Pete, Clearwater area. And then we have another hub in Tallahassee. We have a couple stores in Tennessee and a few stores up in Dublin, Ohio.
Wow.
And so as a used car group director, how does your role differ relative to somebody who might be working at one individual store?
I try to harness the power of the group a little bit
Mm-hmm.
when it comes to what we do, on how we do it, share best practices, you know.
And you've got a lot of data to draw on.
Sure.
How many used cars do you and your group retail per year, approximately?
We're chasing 12,000 this year.
12,000 used units?
Yeah, retail, sure.
What about wholesale?
Oh, 5,000.
17,000 used cars. That's incredible.
So with those numbers, you obviously have a lot of great perspective on the used car business. From your perspective, what does the used market look like right now? I mean, COVID struck, the industry was impacted, but what does it look like right now, and kind of where are we going when it comes to used cars?
It's on fire, right? There's a lot of demand. There's low supply. Numbers are good.
A lot of demand yeah. So it seems kind of be like opposite of what we were hearing in April, right?
Polar opposite. And
Polar opposite.
Changed on a dime.
So yeah, because like a few months ago, everybody's numbers were off because of COVID. But I think it's safe to say that although we're not back where we should be, the market, the retail industry is kind of recovering. And like Carrie said earlier, we're seeing more used car shopping on our site than ever before. What's bad and what's good about this used car market that we're in right now, in your eyes?
The high demand and low supply is driving the acquisition cost up. Right now, wholesale numbers have really outpaced retail numbers, so that just shrinks margin. You got to be really careful. So,
and when you're thinking about demand from a consumer standpoint, what are you seeing in terms of the prime used cars right now? What are the cars that consumers are really demanding the most right now from a used standpoint?
it's pretty typical. SUVs, mid-size, reasonable price. It's all normal stuff. It's just increased demand.
So nothing has changed in terms of like segments or price points with COVID?
Not so much from my eyes. I mean, everything's flipping over so quick right now. I mean, we normally run with maybe an average days in stock of 20, 25-ish, somewhere 20 to 25. I mean, we've been traveling along at a 16 days average days in stock, turning our inventory over 20 times a year.
Wow.
It's just on fire.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay.
Wholesale, is a segment. I try to pride myself in being a very good retailer and a very good wholesaler. And wholesale is just bringing crazy money. So it's tough. Sometimes you trade a reasonably priced car and you realize that you can get more for it wholesale than you can retail, which there's different schools of thought. Some people would say retail everything and everything. I just think the mix is a better way to go. But wholesale is probably the hottest market for me right now.
Well, I mean, I guess it makes sense. I wanted to expand a little bit on Carrie's question about like what was being the prime vehicles. Are they cars that are? I mean, you said segments and fair priced like sedans and stuff, but are they older than usual? Are they newer than usual? Or it's just essentially just what it's been, but just with a more constricted market?
It's just such a mix. I saw an article the other day that said the average age of the cars on the road today just broke over 11 years old.
Oh,
so everything is in our business is always changing. So what used to be acceptable age-wise 5 years ago has changed. So it's the supply is so tight. The stores tend to gravitate towards what's easier to acquire, and
Mm-hmm.
dealing with the enterprise and the fleet salespeople to get a bunch of cars is always appealing. But those tend to be super low margin, uh,
Mm.
and but you need them at the same time. And I look at those as cars that they're super low margin, but at least they generate trades, right?
Right.
That I can use for both retail and wholesale. So you just right now it's just trying to fill as many spots as you can on the lot. Um,
Yeah.
with,
That no.
with trying to protect margin, the stocking because you have to, or stocking because the old saying is you can't sell from an empty shelf. Anytime in my career I've gone out to buy just to buy, I end up being pretty heavy in those cars and have a hard time squeezing out any margin.
Mm-hmm.
So it's looking at every and all segments and trying to pick them up.
Right.
And you
Never
mentioned,
never lose perspective that your showroom and trades are where you have to focus if you're going to protect margin.
well, and speaking of that, you talk about trades from consumers. So when you think about sourcing your vehicles, how often are you getting them direct from the consumer?
So 70% of our cars are traded or purchased directly from consumers.
Is that high, David, relative to an average dealer? It seems like it.
Could be. I don't look at those numbers
Okay.
honestly. I just focus on driving ours up.
So you said either traded in or purchased directly from consumers. We all know what trade-ins are, but can you tell us a little bit more about like your purchase directly from consumers strategy or how that's working for you and how you're doing it?
Yep. I really use, I have a buyer on my corporate team, and that buyer focuses really on those for sale by owner leads. And at this point in time, I use two sources for that. I use TrueCar. So if somebody goes to TrueCar and they get a value and they don't have a vehicle of interest, they just want to sell their car, those leads go to my buyer. We also have the TrueCar Accutrade widget on all of our websites. So anything that says "sell my car," they go through the TrueCar process, and that goes to our buyer. Anything on our website, we do. I have a great e-commerce director, Steve Parent, and what he's done for me is all the leads get sorted. Where if there's any vehicle of interest, it goes in as just a normal internet lead. But if there's no vehicle interest, it goes into our CRM as a campaign and goes directly to my buyer. Um,
Oh,
and my buyer sources all of those. And then we also use a company called VAN, which is acronym for Vehicle Acquisition Network. And they have their own little kind of CRM follow-up tool where they ping for sale by owner vehicles, and those leads come into their system. And then my buyers, really BDC style, really stay on top of those leads with a lot of tenacity, because sometimes people have to post their car and get a true understanding of
yeah.
values. So they're working those two pipelines for direct for sale by owner, and then TrueCar. And we also use TrueCar in our service drive. We have a service drive program to for exchanges, which is your typical equity type exchange where you can identify customers that have equity in their cars and their newer cars. They're lease terms type things where you can flip them into another vehicle.
Mhm.
But we're really drilling down on 2012 to 2016s and really targeting them for direct buys. And then we use a TrueCar Accutrade to give the folks a value and to start that process of buying the cars in the drive.
So from a consumer standpoint, you mentioned, obviously we know that you've worked with our TrueCar trade tool. But from a consumer standpoint, the tool is giving them an upfront valuation on their vehicle online. What feedback do you get from consumers on, how that benefits them?
There's a lot of trust behind the name and the process. So a lot of the cars we buy are consumers that just appreciate the time savings. They appreciate the data and what it gives them to give them an understanding of the value. And they're pretty easy transactions. The at the end of the day, you have to decide how aggressive you want to be on your valuations, right? And when you feel as though there's more value in the vehicle than TrueCar's or Accutrade's giving it, you just have to be consumer friendly and give it to them. So we're having a lot of success with it, and our consumer feedback is they appreciate the product, the experience, and the approach.
Oh, that's fantastic. I think when you talk about sourcing used cars, a lot of people, of course, my expectation is a lot of dealerships rely upon, of course, trade-ins and secondary auction or flip, depending upon their perspective. But when it comes to using the opportunity to actually just buy that vehicle from that consumer's garage, being deliberate about it seems to have a lot of success. And I'm really happy to hear that it's working well for you and for the people who are coming into your drive. I think that's just a great opportunity that's probably overlooked by many people if they haven't, really given it a serious interview as a way to source cars. And right now, with everybody being so tight, it just makes sense that you look at all options.
You got to be considered. It's not easy. You just have to be tenacious and consistent about it.
That's fantastic. Now, so you said something earlier that I really want to touch on. You said that you have an average days in stock of about 16 now or so on your used cars. That's just incredible. So you're not actively trying to turn them faster? Is that the market's demanding that they just go quicker?
Sure.
Okay.
So we're generally a top turn style dealership before and after COVID. So right now it's just, all out. You gotta kind of ignore some of the metrics like the missing photo report. I'll have vendors call me and say, geez, you got a lot of missing photos. And I'm like, well, I got half my cars are up on a lift right now. Right? And I'll tell you, lately it's made me think about, everybody stresses how important photos are. But I tell you, I think we're selling half of our cars that aren't even photoed up yet.
Hey, you know what? Just on a personal note, I bought a used car back in December, and I was looking for something particular. And the listing actually just showed up, the vehicle that I wanted, and there was no photos. And so, I understand the game, having worked in the business for a million years. So I contacted the salesperson and I said, hey, maybe this car is still in recon or something. Would you be so kind as to go in the back and just take a couple pictures for me? And he did. And I bought the car, I think the day it hit the floor. And that was pre-COVID and pre-inventory squeeze. So I can totally see how much more prevalent that might be right now.
But you know what that means, Matt?
Uh-oh.
They laid you away.
Look, I'll tell you what, David, I've been talking this game that people will actually pay for good service and for the good product and for the good process.
Sure.
And being in the business for 20 years, I'm waiting for it. It's like, is this guy just going to try to knock my head off? And when he went for it, I was like, you know what? Okay, you deserve it. You did everything that I wanted. You had the right car. You didn't give me any crap. Go ahead. I'm going to beat you up for some extra keys and some floor mats, but that's it, man. You did your job. I'm good. So
selection's key, right? You said you found all you wanted, so that's how 100% of it.
That's how we have to be sometimes. We can't walk and not talk and we can't talk that and not walk that,
Right.
It's not all about price. Sometimes it's just about experience and vehicle, and that's why I went for it. But yeah, I probably paid a little more.
That's all right. That's all right. We appreciate it. The whole demand thing and the segments, trying to figure out that segment to chase or what to stock. You just don't know for sure what's fueling the market. You read a lot of different things. Obviously, I mean, I myself looked at the one-time government assistance program where a lot of people got checks that it was going to be kind of like a one-time quick spike.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of rolled over to the additional unemployment that they, that we're sending out. And as that dries up, you wonder, right?
Oh, right.
You wonder, are there new car customers? I know a lot of people talk about new cars because of shortages and incentives being pulled out. The average price has kind of come up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But so is new car pricing because of the low supply and high demand. So is it more that people got displaced from their jobs and they're now in a new economic bracket and they're now looking for used cars and they used to be new car buyers? All of it's just a guess, really, what's fueling things right now. And it's a guess on how long the hot market's going to last. But I can tell you the safety net is turned.
Mm-hmm.
If you take a look at the hot market and you try to identify the hottest segments and you go out and you pay more than you wanted to for that, and you kind of think it gives you the right to kind of charge more than the market is pricing, and you think you should hold on to the car longer
And wait for that one person or
playing with fire, because at one point in time we're going to hit a wall and there will be an adjustment. And buy what you think you should buy, pay what you have to pay to get it, but just make sure you're turning it over. Don't hold on to it.
It's interesting too. I always think about, ride share, people who take public transportation too, especially if you're in a city like LA or New York or Chicago, where, you're not going to get in that Uber like you used to, or you're not going to ride that bus. And so if you're a bus rider every day, the used car market is probably where you'd end up next if you had to buy a car.
Yeah, I've heard that. There's a lot of opinion with that. Sure.
Yeah.
Lack of people using the public transportation is fueling it, right? Mm-hmm. Probably all the points that people bring it up are part of what's fueling it. You just don't know which piece of the puzzle will change,
Yeah. I have a friend. I want to ask you for advice for her. So she owns an independent dealer. We've interviewed her on the show before. Her name's Amanda Gordon of Gojo Auto in Denver, and a very small lot. And so I think what you're dealing with is so much on a larger scale than what she's dealing with. But if you were to give her advice, I think her challenge when I talk to her is, she's going to the auction. She's trying to figure out the cars to buy, and she doesn't want to buy too many, as you mentioned, because things are inflated. She doesn't want to get stuck with too many cars that she can't sell. So I think if you think about a smaller player like that, what advice would you give to them on the right balance?
Well, I mean, from my perspective, stay away from the auctions and drill down on consumers selling their cars. For sale by owner all the way. Keep your disciplines. I tell her, keep your disciplines in place. Sounds like she's got a small lot and she understands her limits. So pick out the onesie twosies and be patient. Wait till they turn over and get another one.
That's great advice.
Yep.
Yeah. I really just love hearing the idea of just because I haven't really heard people using it as a real option to supplement their inventory. I've always seen it be utilized as like a nice to have, where somebody is really just buying direct from consumers. Out here in Southern California, you drive on the 405 freeway and, dealerships have signs that say, we'll buy your car, whether you buy a car from us or whatever it is. But having worked in this area, you'll see that it's just not really a process, right? It's like, oh, there's somebody here who wants to sell this car. Is he trying to buy something? No. Okay, well, let's go get Phil, the used car manager, and just, right? And getting the impression from you, that's the wrong way to go about it.
Yeah, Matt, you bring up a really good point. Where our stores are off of US 19 in St. Pete, Clearwater, you drive 6 miles and you've got every sign. We buy cars, whether you buy a car from us. There's a gentleman that has a billboard that's right across the street from the CarMax, and he says we pay more than CarMax, up to $1,000, right? There's just all of this stuff going on, and ultimately, there's the conversation. Let's find the used car manager. Oh, he's out. Tell the people he's out. And then I also believe that you got to be thirsty for inventory, and you got to be thirsty for all of it. And I tell my buyer, I want wholesale cars, I want retail cars. So dealerships that say we buy cars, whether you buy a car from us or not, usually the first question the used car manager has is, well, what are they selling? What am I going to do with that? Where am I going to go with that? I don't want one of those. So the salespeople go through that enough times where then they qualify that seller. And when a seller shows up with a car that they know the used car manager is just going to throw out and be bothered that you even asked them about it, they're just going to cut that customer off and not waste their time. Oh, right. Listen, that's not the one we're looking for. So we, being a really good wholesaler, I'm 100% seller. So that being 100% seller really tells me a lot of things. Like, I see the market change very quickly. I can usually see the change before, the press starts reporting on the change, usually about 2-3 weeks ahead of time. But that wholesale machine needs to be fueled, and it needs to be fueled with cars. So when my buyer is chasing for sale by owners, don't care what it is, I want it.
I have a question about your process and your valuation process. And so I know what we've learned even through TrueCar Trade, consumers are getting an upfront value. And that's based on them filling out a survey, about their vehicle. And then that information is going to be passed to you. And then you're going to have to, evaluate that vehicle and confirm that what the consumer told you was actually correct. And then you can make adjustments and then give them a new value if there was, discrepancies. But I think kind of, what we've learned is breaking it down for the consumer, helping them understand how you got to that value. And having that built into the tool has been helpful. But I think from your perspective, how do you tackle giving a consumer upfront value like that, and then handling any discrepancies if it's, if the car isn't in the condition that they said it would be in?
Well, I'm finding, over the course of time, people are starting to get more and more honest about how they fill out those forms. I think, that Auto Trader came out with Trade-In Marketplace that morphed into the Kelly Instant Cash Offer. And I was really excited when the product first came out, and 99% of the time, everybody filled it out. It was perfect. Consumer just, it's perfect. Now the consumer is realizing they want to get more of a realistic idea of where they're going to be. And they are filling it out a little bit more accurately. The tool, it's if you have an older car and you really, I'm not going to say pick it apart. If you're very accurate with its condition, okay, Accutrade is going to come down and almost give it no value whatsoever. I had an example last week where we bought a Volvo off of the street, and the manager really used the tool, and I hate to say this because it's not what I feel is the best practice, to under allow or lowball the customer, because he just totally picked this thing apart. But he wasn't really saying anything. It was a very old car and it was very beat up. Okay. But when you look at the data, okay, things still had value going down the lane. So with older cars, you don't have to be overly concerned about that condition report. And it's nothing that anybody doesn't really know, right? If you have a 2019 Mercedes with 3,000 miles on it, and it's a car that's in an $80,000 price bracket, and it already has 2 accidents on its vehicle history report, well, that's going to be important if they missed it, right? So
Right.
you just have to sit down and have a really good consultative conversation with the customer. I really, it's not overly popular, particularly, but I really try to coach towards a almost one price appraisal process. Like, I'm going to figure out what your car is worth, and I'm going to really give it to you. Right. So I've had that conversation, right, Carrie? I see your head going up and down, right? If you were a consumer and I came out and I said, Carrie, I'm going to take a look at your car. I'm going to look at a lot of pieces of data, maybe some data that you looked at before you came in. And I'm going to figure out the most money I could possibly give you for your car and give it to you right up front. How does that sound? I haven't met a consumer that doesn't start doing this when I'm having that conversation.
Yeah, I love the idea of that, just even from a marketing and a branding standpoint. I don't know if I've ever heard of one price, but on your trade valuation.
Trade process, right?
On the trade side of it.
So the Accutrade and TrueCar tool I'm using to try to get and leverage that with our appraisal process, right? I have 20 stores. Somebody that it's not perfect out there. We got a lot of room to improve. So we struggle with a lot of things every day internally. But if you use the tool and really kind of like find every nick and flaw that you can to bring the TrueCar number down as low as you can, to give it to the consumer and see if they take it. Let's just see if they take it, right? And then you turn around, and then your only move is to discredit the tool, right? Oh, well, we'll beat that number all the time. Well, wait a minute. Then why do you have it on your website? Why are you feeding it?
Right.
So it's a fine balance. So for me, the approach is a straightforward approach. It's we're going to give you multiple bids on your vehicle. Listen, I was at one car dealership for 20 years, just outside of Philadelphia. So I was very close to Manheim, Pennsylvania. And I went to Manheim, PA for 20 years of my life every Friday. And I watched Bob Hollinshead sell his cars. And he's the one driving the numbers behind the Accutrade.
Yes.
And it's interesting to me to see my team tell me, as we were in the beginning days of COVID, oh, this Accutrade, it's way off. Oh, it's way off. It's way light on the cars. No, that's what they're worth. Okay. Like, go to the auction. Well, I'm not going to sell it for that. Well, then you want us to just hold on to it, right? And then now I'm getting the exact opposite reaction. Okay. I'm getting some of my stores calling me saying, David, I'm looking at this car for 20 and the Accutrade is 22. And I'm like, well, give the people 22 and we'll sell it to Hollinshead. Like use leverage it, right? But those are very few and far between when we look at a car for 20 and Accutrade takes 22, right? So when I say to you, Carrie, listen, I'm going to give you multiple bids on your car, really generally, most of the time, it's my responsibility to be the highest bidder. Okay, that's why they want me appraising cars. I'm going to try to be the highest bidder. But when the TrueCar Accutrade is higher, it's a win-win, because I can offer it to you. You can get the sales tax savings, okay, and then I can just sell it to them. So I don't have to risk anything.
Right.
So if you're having the right conversations and the right language, and your ultimate goal isn't to find the lowest possible value point, you can start with your appraisal process and work your way up from there, overcoming those objections and overcoming the conversations you need to have when a consumer particularly misses something that is a significant value change in what they did in their living room. and showed up at your dealership. If you have that straightforward approach, it's kind of easy. At the end of the day, if that valuation makes the consumer new purchase unaffordable, or at that value they'd rather just keep their car, well, it's okay. Right, get over it. We don't close everybody. Okay. Just be friendly about how you tell it to them, and say, in 6 months or a year from now, make sure you come back. I don't know.
Yeah, that sounds fair. When you're thinking, you said something, it's like, hey, if the car, I'm looking at it for 20, Accutrade said it's worth 22, give them 22, I'll sell it to Accutrade. I'm just thinking about the customer acquisition. I mean, I'm putting myself in a consumer's footprint and saying, okay, well, I'm thinking I'm going to get 20,600, and the guy comes back and says, I'll give you 20,800. How do you not get that customer? I mean, it's got to be great for just the overall feel of the store, overall feel for the environment. When those few and far betweens do happen, though, I mean, it's nice. It's just a good feeling when you can do that, especially when it's not going to hurt you at all, because you've got Accutrade who's offered the money for it as is. So I really like that.
Yeah, I think the validation piece is so important in what I'm hearing you say too, because at the end of the day, there are consumers that if you don't give them a value up front, through a tool like TrueCar, you might not get the chance to interact with them at all. Or if there isn't maybe a third party validation or a stamp on there, they may not feel good about like where this value came from. So, I mean, touch on that from a validation standpoint.
Yeah, it's, I mentioned before that, consumers, I mean, there's a lot of trust there.
Mm-hmm.
So when they do it and they see it and they trust it, it makes things easy. And that, get like the cash value thing is something you need to leverage to build that validation up, right? Like, you can hear about overinflated trade-in values from the dealer down the street. You can, but nothing is more of a truth serum than being backed by the cash, and multiple credible sources giving you cash values on your car. It relieves the angst with the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that definitely helps.
Yeah,
that's awesome. I read a fantastic interview that you took part in earlier this year. I think it was with Auto Remarketing, and what was really I really loved it. One of the things that really jumped out to me about this was your attitude about the importance of recon, right?
Yeah.
And I was hoping that, I mean, I know what you said. The people who've watched the show may not know what your attitude is about recon. So I was hoping that you would tell the people how you feel about the importance of reconditioning with used cars. And then I have a follow-up question on top of that.
All right, it's a little scary because I might not remember the article, so I hope
you can make it up as you go, David.
Something similar, right? Recon, of course, obviously speed is super important. But in that appraisal process where you find out what is really wrong with the car, right? It's important to appraise the car properly. But at the end of the day, whether you missed something that was wrong or not, you still just have to fix it.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of a no line item veto guy on the recon. If it's broken, fix it. If it's not, don't worry about it.
Yeah.
So I really believe that the two reasons of vehicle ages are mispriced vehicles and vehicles with substandard reconditioning. So reconditioning is a stickler for me.
Yeah, and that's what you had said in the article, and that's what really stuck out, is because I'm not pointing any fingers and I'm not knocking anybody, but I don't know that everybody has the same opinion about fixing things that are broken. It's just sometimes it's like, well, will somebody buy it? In its present condition, and then if it becomes a problem within the 30 days or whatever it is, they can bring it back and we'll address it then, as opposed to no, I'm going to get it fixed. And I think that I think that's a great attitude to have, in my opinion. I think it moves our business forward, because nobody needs to hear these stories of their sister who just spent $17,000 on a used car and then there was something broken that the dealership didn't address when,
you ever try to go sell a car and the battery's dead and you got to get the jumper and you finish telling the people that you just checked over the car? I mean,
yeah, it's a difficult one.
Put a battery in the car, please.
Yeah, do those small things. So thank you. I wanted to hear. I mean, my thought was that if the world hears it from a guru like yourself, and like somebody's playing with that idea, they're like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna just go in and just go ahead and get it handled right now. I think that's where we should be. And that the follow-up question that I had to that, because I know that recon is very important to you, is that how is that changing with a 16-day turn on average for your used cars?
Not much. It's the COVID situation. Probably the benefit was, consumers just stopped coming into the service departments, so they were very, very hungry for business. So they were really able to facilitate really strong turn times for us, and we sell cars either factory certified, or we have a Crown Confidence plan that we have. So it's kind of an internal certification, and we have a 101 point checklist with, tire standards, brake standards, servicing standards. And, we interestingly enough, as I was waiting for this call to start, anything with less than 90,000 miles on it has to be sold Crown Confidence. So I got a phone call from a manager that said they had a car with 89,500 miles on it. And they said, do I have to sell a Crown Confidence? I go, yeah, either that or make it a demo and drive it for more than 500 miles. Like, drive. It has less than 90,000 miles on it. We're going to recon it to our standards. Stop.
Right.
I don't want to question it.
That's beautiful.
Well, and I like what you said. You talked about Crown Confidence. I want to hear more on that. But because I was just about to ask you a question about the value of the CPO programs out there from a manufacturing standpoint. But it sounds like you have your own dealer certification. So how does that play in terms of value from a consumer standpoint, having, either the manufacturer, stamp of approval on that vehicle, or your own, Crown certified or Crown Confident?
There's value there. Head to head, same price. Does it get you the sale? Right. If you're the same price as a car that doesn't have it, and ours has it, if it wins the sale for us, I'm happy. Does it get us more money directionally? Yeah, sure. And same with the certified programs. The only thing you have to do is you have to remember that it becomes commonplace to you as a salesperson, and you can't fall under the ether and assume that every consumer understands what they mean and what they're getting for it. So you have to be passionate about it. You have to sell it. You have to make sure they know about it. Internet, email inquiries, phone inquiries, people in the showroom. Just be a broken record and keep repeating it. Manufacturer programs are crazy. We have 25-ish brands or so. Some are very friendly and are really great sources of inventory for us. And some, with the way their programs are and buying grounded leases, and economically, they're just impossible to work with. So each manufacturer CPO program has advantages to the consumer and then advantages to the dealer, and you have to weigh it to figure out which way you want to go.
That makes perfect sense. Yeah. When we think about people who are looking for a CPO car, I don't think it's necessarily, and I think there's been studies that have proven this out, that it's not necessarily that it has to say certified pre-owned vehicle from the OEM, right? It just has to say, what people are really looking for is just that blanket of comfort saying, hey, if something does go wrong that I can't see with my eyes, or, whatever, I'm going to be taken care of. And hearing that from a group of your size, I think that makes sense. But that confidence that you're building. But of what you said, what really resonated with me the most is, and probably the teachable moment is, don't get caught up in the ether and assume that everybody knows these programs. I'm guilty of it when I sold. I'm sure people watching right now are guilty of it. and they just assume that they can say Crown certified and the customer knows all the benefits that they get from Crown certified or whatever it is. So I really appreciate you hearing somebody like you and of your stature saying, be that broken record, say it over and over and over again, make sure that everybody knows exactly the value that's being presented with this, this stamp that we're putting on it. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, I think I have just been through a school for used cars right now. I feel like you have like taught me so much.
You're too kind. Thank you very much.
In 45 minutes. And we got a couple comments. Josh Sinsky says this is great content. He's watching live. So I think there's going to be so much value out there that you're providing to used car managers, independent dealers, people that are on this side of the business. So thank you, David, so much. One for being on this interview, but also for being a TrueCar dealer, for being a TrueCar trade dealer. We really, really appreciate your business.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. And if anybody wants to reach out to you, are you open for requests from strangers, or they just have to keep watching for the next interview that you're going to do if they want to poke your brain?
Yeah, you can ping me anytime. No problem.
Right on. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Carrie, any final questions?
No, I think we've learned a lot. Thank you so much. I think for everyone watching, David Simches, you definitely want to follow him. He obviously knows what he's talking about when it comes to this side of the business. We've gotten great advice from you. So we really appreciate you, David, and your time.
Thank you very much. All right.
All right.
Wow. That was amazing. I would say of all the interviews we've done, I mean, that one tactically, I just feel like I obviously am not a used car manager. I'm not on the side of the business, but if I was, I'd have something I could really take away and do tomorrow, particularly in this challenging environment.
Yeah, absolutely. And even within that, though, he's explaining how you can still treat the customer with respect, be upfront, give them a couple bucks for their car, while you still recondition it, while you still go through the sales process properly. Even though there are constraints with margin, even though there are constraints with time, this is just it's like a master class on how to do it right. I mean,
yeah, absolutely. And I think what stood out, he talked a lot, obviously, about TrueCar Trade and Accutrade and that partnership. But, I think the goal there obviously wasn't to do a commercial for TrueCar. It was more of thinking about, when he's talking about transparency, right? He's talking about giving the consumer an upfront value, a specific value through that tool. He's talking about, being able to break it down and help them understand how you got to that tool and the validation piece. So I think that's the learning from it. From the larger audience is not a commercial, but more of his process.
Right.
And how he's using the tool and incorporating into his process, how he's communicating. And that to me was the big takeaway.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I just like to add on how deliberate he and his team are in extracting value from tools to get vehicles from consumers. Because if you think about it, Carrie, I see that bookcase. You're not working in your office, right?
Right.
And I'm not working in my office. My needs for a vehicle may have been diminished. There's a lot of people out there whose needs have been diminished. Why not use this opportunity to collect those great used cars? And it sounds like he and his team are very deliberate in doing that. So I really just took a lot from this. David Simches is one of the best. Yeah,
I wrote down something he said. You have to be thirsty for all inventory, all. And that word thirsty, I mean, that's a good way of describing it. But I think, the idea of acquire those cars direct from consumer, 70% of his inventory, but you're going to probably lose on some here and there, but you're going to win on others. And altogether though, you're moving cars fast.
Yeah. And if a guy who sells 15,000 used units, 17,000 used units a year tells me that this is a good practice, all right.
Right. Yeah. He definitely has the credibility there.
Okay. 34 years in the biz, and you're retailing 12,000 new used cars and wholesaling 5,000. Okay, I'm going to listen to what you have to say. So I'm just glad that he came to hang out with us today.
Absolutely. Well, that was another good show on Industry Insider. We'll be back next Tuesday for another surprise guest that we'll announce. Another surprise guest. I'm sure we have someone amazing. So look out for that.
Don't tell me anymore. And who was the person who commented that this was great?
Josh Sinsky.
Okay, Josh Sinsky, can you do us a favor? Can you share this with your friends in your group so they can see some of this great content too?
Yes,
Sorry.
Josh. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Thank you for everybody that's watched throughout this show, and we will see you next week. See you soon.